Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for the first 5 episodes of the brand new Disney Plus and Hulu series Goosebumps. Listener beware, you're in for a scare. My name is Kev, and like series mascot Slappy, I'll be your host that puts the dummy in ventriloquist dummy. If you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast focusing on the world of movies, TV shows, games, toys, and collectibles, and all things geek-centric. Joining me for the scares today, first, every day is his hairiest adventure, because with a beard like that, he's got to be living in werewolf skin. It's our resident lycanthrope, Nate.
Carly Beth, I'm scared, Carly Beth. Let's leave, Carly Beth. I don't want to be here anymore, Carly Beth.
Unfortunately, folks, we are
It's just a
not
throwback.
talking about that Goosebumps series. And also joining us, some days I wish my best friend was invisible, because if you ever see him with a camera, don't say cheese and die. It's the beast from the east, J-Law.
Yo, what's going on?
You wish he was invisible?
I'm trying to get as many book titles in here as possible.
I appreciate it.
How we doing today,
Appreciate
gentlemen?
it. Good,
Doing
feeling
well.
spooky.
Nice. Now, today we're calling all creeps. If you ever attended a Scholastic book fair while in elementary school, you are more than likely very aware of the book series Goosebumps and its author, R.L. Stine. If not, well, you're in deep trouble. If you've been looking forward to revisiting your childhood haunts, we're here today to let you know if the show was worth the wait or if you should be careful what you wish for. We want to chomp our fangs and clap our monster paws to give a special thanks, as always, to our friends at Disney Studios Canada for letting us watch this series early for review. Before we get talking about a series based on one of the most successful children's writers of all time, it's important that we take a moment to celebrate the fact that our favorite Hollywood writers have resolved their issues, won big, and ended the WGA strike. But there's still much work to be done as it relates to the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. We here at Geekcentric believe the members of SAG-AFTRA deserve not only fair compensation for their work, but also a sense of job security that is currently under threat. Hopefully the bigwigs of Hollywood come to their senses soon and let all of the talented people responsible for our favorite forms of entertainment get back to work sooner rather than later. Now, a little history on the Goosebumps franchise. Goosebumps started as a series of children's horror fiction novellas written by R.L. Stine. 62 books were published from 1992 to 1997, with over 400 million copies sold globally in 35 languages as of October 2022. Making it the second best-selling book series of all time next to Harry Potter. A huge part of this success was in part to a partnership with Scholastic Book Fairs, with Goosebumps sales accounting for 15% of their annual revenue in 1996. That success, of course, led to a variety of spin-off media projects, including a TV anthology series that ran for 4 seasons from 1995 to 98, bringing most of the popular stories to life on the screen. Video games and comics soon followed, and in 2015, the first of 2 movies featuring Jack Black as author R.L. Stine was released, followed by a sequel in 2018. The first movie even features a fun cameo by the author himself, playing a teacher named Mr. Black. Now, growing up, were you fellow Bumpies?
You know, a Bumpy.
I don't know. I can't believe, even though there's a popular, there was a fan club that ran from 94 to 98, like everything has a fan name. There wasn't one for Goosebumps that I could find, so I'm going with Bumpies.
I like Bumpies. You know what? Here's the thing. So, like, you mentioned the Scholastic Book Fair, and yeah, dude, I loved seeing those books. I think I was a little too afraid when a lot of them came out. I'm born in the 90s. I was born in 1990. So for me, some of these books were a bit older at the time, by about maybe like 6 or 7 years. The only book I remember reading that I think was about 6 years old when I read it was Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. It came out in 93. And so I think I read it a little bit after that, but I was taking piano lessons myself. So like that really hit. It's pretty freaky. Like the teacher, if I can remember properly, like I think like kills the students or steals their hands or something. Something like that, something awful, which is just like, I remember at the time being a little kid and being like, how the heck am I allowed to read this right now? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of those books are, spooky. And I remember I was reading them right as they were coming out. So we're talking 7, 8 years old. They were some of the first books, full size with chapters that I can remember reading. And, much like the show we're going to talk about, and it's PG rating, it's like, geez, this is some pretty spooky stuff for kiddos. But again, we will get into that. Just how about yourself? Were you bumpy at all growing up?
Yeah, we grew up at around the same time,
Yeah.
so naturally I definitely read a lot of these books. Much of what we're going to talk about from these episodes harken back to those books, which is great. Some of my favorites was Welcome to Camp Nightmare.
Excellent.
I loved The Headless Ghost. Haunted Mask, obviously 1 and 2 was great. There was one with a superhero that I remember too, and a lot of these were turned into the TV show back on Fox. Some of them actually found their way. Return of the Mummy was great. Ghost Beach was another one that I really, really loved as well. And this was like at a time when like my imagination was popping off. So sometimes I would scare myself a lot from this. But like me reading books was a very short-lived experience because I once I found graphic novels and comic books, I never turned back to books. But yeah, it was the book franchise that I actually enjoyed reading just for leisure, whereas everything else was just for school work, if you will. So
Well, I don't think I became a true bumpy myself until that Canadian produced TV show hit the airwaves. And I remember like just the scariest image, and I think this is probably the thing that the show is maybe known for in its intro, is from the episode My Hairiest Adventure. So I'm happy you called that out, Kevin. Like the golden retriever with glowing green eyes. It wrecked me as a kid, and I'm so glad it didn't turn me off dogs forever. But just something about the juxtaposition of such a kind-looking dog, like a golden retriever, they're so beautiful, and it just has these evil green eyes. It affected me, dude. Like, it's imprinted in my brain.
That show and the theme song at the beginning, it ran for years and years. Up here in Canada, we would have watched it on YTV. I think down in the States, it was on one of the Fox channels for kids. But yeah, definitely a staple of most people in and around our ages' childhood. I'm probably definitely the biggest bumpy of the three of us. I had all 62 books of that original series. I love them. Some of my favorites, if anybody knows me and the fact that I'm a history buff and everything, and I love Egyptology. I loved The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, which is book 5, and then book 23. I was so excited that there was a sequel, Return of the Mummy, not to be confused with Mummy Returns, starring Brendan Fraser. Another favorite of mine was Deep Trouble. Even just the cover of it with a giant shark swimming up under the kids swimming. But my all-time favorite was book 27, A Night in Terror Tower. Really cool story about these kids on a tour of an old castle who get transported back in time and confused for the young prince and princess, and they have to escape the executioner before it's too late. It was really fun going back and looking at some of these book titles and then going, oh man, but it wasn't just the titles, it was the images, the illustrations on those front covers that I was so excited to run down to a Scholastic book fair and see what the newest story was going to be. That cover for A Night at Terror Tower, it's got a hooded executioner holding a big double-sided axe coming down a spiral staircase. I'll never forget it. Huge shout out to Tim Jacobus, who was the illustrator who created all of those incredible covers back in the day. Absolutely loved them. But let's get to the bleeding heart of the matter and talk about the newest iteration of Goosebumps for TV. This time around, Goosebumps follows a group of 5 high schoolers as they embark on a shadowy and twisted journey to investigate the tragic passing 3 decades earlier of a teen named Harold Biddle, while also unearthing dark secrets from their parents' past. The show stars Justin Long, Rachel Harris, Rob Hubel, Zach Morris, no, not Mark Paul Gosselaar from Saved by the Bell, Issa Briones, Miles McKenna, Anna Yee Puig, and Will Price, and is produced by Nicholas Stoller, Rob Letterman, and Hillary Winston. The show debuts on Disney Plus and Hulu on Friday, October 13th, with 5 episodes, followed by weekly releases for the following 5 episodes. What an absolutely perfect release date for a show like this. Disney, I wish you were doing something like this for a movie you released in the middle of the summer called Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's funny. My dad was actually just watching it on Disney Plus because it just came out, and he's like, this is a great time to watch this movie, and I'm like, yeah, it would have been a good time to put it out. You're right.
it really, really would have. But have no fear, families. If there's nothing to go see in the theaters for you guys to get your spook on together, there is a show coming right in the middle of October that I think will be perfect for families looking for some scares. So why don't we stay out of the basement and start with our thoughts on what worked for the show's first 5 episodes. Justin, lead us off here.
Yeah, I think, what we're talking about in relation to the books and the past series that was in the early 90s, as you were mentioning, those were adaptations of the book. What I love about this series, or what I really admire about it, is how they found ways to incorporate elements of those books into a larger story. And I think that works really well because it's you're not going to be able to do justice to any of those books in a half hour, even 40 minutes or an hour long episode. So to take those elements, treat them as myth and lore, which they are to a lot of people who grew up with Goosebumps, and implement them in a new way, I think that's refreshing, and it still harkens back to the things that we love about this book franchise as being, sort of having the right amount of scares and creepy crawly things, and it really does work, and I found myself really surprised at how much I enjoyed it based on how they were implementing these little elements throughout the episodes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as I said, I enjoyed the original show from the 90s, and I can definitely respect the legacy of R.L. Stine, and I've never seen the Jack Black movies, so I was really interested to sort of see, get my first taste of sort of what is this series in 2023, and I can't say it fully worked for me right off the bat, but I think there is some fun to be had with this show. I think by the end of the first episode, there was this sort of gut feeling that I had where I was kind of just like, oh, I kind of wish that they sort of made this more of an anthology series, similar to the show in the 90s of sort of jumping from different group of kids or what have you. However, as the show goes on, I found that it was actually really enjoyable because, as you're saying, Justin, it's a continuous plot, but with each episode focusing on a different teen while still paying homage to the original series and the original stories. I actually think it really was a really smart move for them to move into a serialized series like this, and introducing us to sort of each character through their own individual stories. And I do think that sometimes they branch off a little bit, a little too much into sort of a side story, but it's still fun enough that I didn't mind it too much. And I do love how each episode is named after one of the original books. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's I think my favorite aspect of the show as well is that I think it'd be a lot easier for an author, say such as R.L. Stine, to introduce you to new characters with every story. You get 1 or 2 chapters to learn who they are, what they're about, whereas this show gives you that time to really learn about them. And the characters are kind of fun in that they play against some of the typical tropes and stereotypes that you get from these characters. The jock is a really kind, caring person, and and they sort of explore those ideas a little bit more. The geeky, the photography student actually has a bit of a dark side, and yeah, I think you get a lot more time to explore those ideas based on the way this is a full narrative over 10 episodes rather than being that anthology series. And I think, full episodes of some of these stories might not work the same way they worked in book form, but when you can take small elements and sprinkle them throughout a bigger story, a bigger mystery too, which I'm enjoying, the sort of intrigue that's going on here, I think it really works well for the format.
Yeah, I think, to your point, they're playing with some of the stereotypical tropes and they're kind of flipping it on its head a little bit. And I think that has a lot to do with today's generation, which I think works in favor for this show, but also can work against this show at times as something that maybe didn't work for me in terms of how Gen Z it is. But that said, I think that to your point, it is refreshing to see some of these more or less stereotypical roles that you would see from high school students not the same in this. This is a different high school style. This isn't the 90s high school where the jock is a dick and the photography kid is just some misunderstood artist. There's a little bit of a play with how those characters sort of are represented in this show.
They're all very nice to each other, oddly enough.
Yeah.
Which is like,
They're
that's kind of
no
refreshing.
bullying.
Yeah, I think I will say it is leagues better than the National Treasure series that we got from Disney Plus. I will say it's not that scary. If families are listening to this and they're wondering if it's too scary, I think it's just the right amount of creepy vibe to fit the season. As you were saying, Kevin, what a great release for October. The show's color tone, like the way it looks visually, like it's, the greens and the blue tones, I think look fantastic in terms of just like they fit the vibe. And thankfully, visually, it doesn't fall into that trap that a lot of sort of spooky horror content falls in, where it's not too visibly dark. You know how like a lot of the times you got to turn the brightness up on your TV with a lot of these shows? This one, I didn't find myself having that happen at any point in time. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, yeah, there you go.
Your OLED did its trick. It actually worked for you.
Yes,
thousands of dollars that
TV,
you spent.
and it's amazing, Justin. I will say, there are a lot of parts of the show that are very cheesy, but in a way that actually make me a little nostalgic for the older age of TV, when dialogue could be a bit cringy and episodes felt like they were written for commercial breaks. Like, there are moments in this show that feel like they could cut to commercial. And Justin, you and I were talking about this offline, and there is an ad-supported version of Disney Plus coming in November. So I'm wondering if maybe they even wrote this series in response to the idea that, well, when people watch this in November, that's where those ads get popped in. I don't know.
Wow. Okay, that does answer one of the biggest questions I had for it, because it wasn't making sense the way it was sort of cut and edited and structured.
Yeah.
I hate that going forward. That might be a thing we get with shows like this on some of these platforms that are going to be introducing ads in the I'm going to be paying that 12, 15, 20 bucks, whatever it is, so I don't have my shows broken up, and yet the narrative is still going to feel a bit stinted by those things, so that's annoying. But I will agree that one of the things I struggled the most with was that, when the show was at its best, it was being spooky and quirky and fun. And I think it does get bogged down just a little by some CW-style teen drama. There's some darker themes and tones that they look at that I'm going, who is the real audience for this show? It was a bit confusing at times. They're kind of all over the map. One second it is very much for kids and families. The next it's a show written for kids but with themes for adults. It was all over the map in that sense. So I found
it's all over the map.
Yeah.
That's why your note about it not being necessarily so scary. It's like, it's not really, really scary, but it's scary. Like I think that like
PG means like 8. I think an 8-year-old watching the show would be a bit freaked out, especially in that first episode.
Exactly.
Like,
oh, dude,
I was a little unsettled.
The first episode is so tragic, right? And there's such a fear that's instilled, and then as it evolves, things are happening that are just like, I was like, woo, right? Like I had to watch them one at a time. I couldn't binge them because I'm a bit of a wuss. I got a little scared. You know what I mean? And
you had to turn the lights on?
No, I didn't watch them in broad daylight with a window open, but I definitely took my time with it. And to the point of what you were saying before, like the idea of the show and the mystery that's afoot, if you will, throughout these episodes, it's very intriguing, and how they're able to incorporate all of these spooky elements from the book to kind of give more weight and resonance to each of the parts of the mystery. I think that's really clever writing. I again, just totally surprised at how well they were able to find a way to weave that in to something that still holistically feels original, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it's carried forward by this cast. I think I will say, like, there's no one in the cast that just there's one person in the cast that really does stand out, but as far as the entirety of the I'll get to him in one second, but the characters for the most part they serve their purpose. I don't think there's anyone. The only character that sort of stood out a little bit to me that I wasn't feeling like I was like, I don't believe you, is there's a character named Lucas, but he's meant to come off as kind of dull for that purpose. So I guess it's purposeful. But yeah, dude, Justin Long. Like, I think I never realized that he's kind of becoming a horror staple these days between last year's Barbarian and House of Darkness. Like, he's kind of getting into the horror vibe, and I like it a lot. Yeah. And so, like, he's having a blast here as Mr. Bratt. Like, he's goofy, he's creepy in the best ways possible. And his physical comedy, I was surprised. Like, he's on point with it. I'm enjoying his character probably the most out of anyone.
Yeah, I mean, you did miss one horror staple of Justin Long's, Drag Me to Hell, obviously, which does, again, mix that comedy and horror together, which is what we get here. And yeah, you mentioned his physical comedy. That was my number one note. There is just a sequence that we won't go into, but his physical acting is... I was laughing out loud. He did it so well. I'm so thrilled that he's in the show and it wasn't just a brief cameo. I was kind of worried, like, let's get a big name, pop him in for a quick scare and move on to the kids. But no, he's really an integral part of the story, and the show is that much better for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, we did mention that the show itself takes elements from these different stories and weaves them into a larger narrative, and I do think that it works at times better than it does others. I don't think it's a spoiler to sort of talk about the books that are featured in the show because they are featured already and listed on IMDb. You can go and see what the 10 episodes are named and what books they're inspired by. I will say that their use of Haunted Mask, which is one of the first books in the series, I thought was really, really well done. Whereas one of the books really I remember liking least was also one of my least favorite episodes, Go Eat Worms. I didn't think that worked in the full larger narrative even. It just didn't resonate with me the same way. And that episode deals with some really heavy themes that kind of took me out of the larger story as well. Like as we mentioned, I liked how they're exploring these characters' pasts and, you know, why they are and who they are the way they are. But that was really dark and heavy for a show like this. And so, again, it's just finding that balance that I think they struggle a little with, but most of the time hit the nail on the head. And, you know, I think you guys both mentioned it. The production value here, especially compared to the 90s iteration of this show, is so top-notch and so much better than I really was expecting going into it. So I think from top to bottom, between the acting and the writing and the production, the show is better than I certainly expected it to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, where for me it feels like the things that didn't work, and I think we kind of were talking about it, is that CW-ness of it. That sort of, I get it. We're not the audience that the show is tailored for, so I understand that. But I think at the same time, you know, kind of being maybe on the outside of that generation looking in, you know, there's a very Smallville, or even more recently Riverdale. This has got Riverdale all over it, but where it exceeds Riverdale is in those elements that we were talking about: production value, the scares, the horror vibes of it are so much more elevated than Riverdale, where it comes off cheap and a little cheesy and very goofy and childish, where this is having fun while also really scaring you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, yeah, those are definitely aspects that worked. For me, the first note that I wrote as I was reviewing this and writing down notes for the review is the dialogue isn't great. I will be the first to say, like, I do really appreciate the modern language that characters are, you know, there's a character that refers to a situation as, you know, it's getting very cishet up in here, or they'll say things like goated, and I appreciate that. I think for as far as some of the writing is concerned, they at times they seem to know who the audience is that they're going after, and I do appreciate that there's moments with these characters where they reference COVID. It's crazy to think that we're now in a place where shows are referencing that as our past. It's just we're so used to getting out of our world going into these shows that are meant to sort of take us away, and just to sort of hear that it was interesting. That said, there are a ton of moments that come off as very cringy. Like the people that are writing the show ask their kids or younger family members for words that they can use that just don't fully fit in those situations. And I will say, I think my biggest problem with the show actually has to do with how even some of the adults in this show talk. Because again, I know that this is on Disney Plus and we're aiming for a younger audience, but and this isn't a spoiler, but when you have two consenting adults where it's implied that they just had sex and one of them tells the other, and I quote, "I just had to wash my private parts with a mini bar of soap," it just feels so synthetic to me. It doesn't feel realistic in any way that adults would talk like that. I don't know. It just was like threw me off.
Sure, but I think that it was a very raw and real moment that feels very out of place for a show like this. I will give you that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this is for young kids as much as it is for teen kids, like teenager kids that are
private parts.
I don't know. It was a very mom thing to say.
But I guess it's what's the rating, right? I guess we have to play with it.
Well, you have to keep that in mind. But like again, like that like 8-year-old, 10-year-olds are going to watch this, right?
Sure.
But they're not the ones that are targeted that are targeted for it. It's literally the people that are in high school, grade 9, you know what I mean, and onward, that are going to watch this, and then us. People of our age who grew up with Goosebumps that are going to do it. And I think that, again, is another thing that I wish that it had a little bit more of, is maybe something that recognized the audience that sort of kicked off Goosebumps. I think this is definitely tailored more to today's generation, which is fine. I understand it's adaptation, it's making something new. But, we've talked about these series that are rebooted or they're adapted from other material. There's a way that they sometimes recognize the audience that established them and a new audience. And I just feel like this is just for a new audience. It doesn't really recognize the audience that kind of made Goosebumps what it was. And that was my same problem with the movies. I thought that they were just way too child kid adventure style, like Night at the Museum, but with scariness. And it just felt like it was a means to try to speak to a new audience without really giving any consideration to those kids from the 90s that grew up and that went to book fairs and, collected all of the books and were enamored with the stories and were so committed to it. Like, for us as fans, we're able to pull out from it what it is that's from the books. And I guess that's the part, if that's what the writing was meant to do. But I don't know, there isn't enough, at least in these 5 episodes, to make it feel like they're also acknowledging my generation as an audience. And I'm not selfish, but
no, I think there's only so far that the titles of these episodes and some of the little references that are there can pull us along. I will say, just because we're on the topic of horror, there is the tropey fun thing that characters do in horror shows and horror movies of like, oh, don't do that. Oh, I wouldn't do that. Oh, why are they making that decision? That's not the right decision. But there were a lot of times in this show where characters would make decisions that just felt so dumb and not in a way that was like fun, if that makes sense. They make decisions that you're like, that just clearly is done for them to get themselves to a certain part in this story, or for them to write this story a certain direction. And again, it just comes off as so forced and so synthetic at times, where it just, I don't know, the pacing is weird and it doesn't work for me. And I think the biggest area that I found this to be was exactly kind of where you were getting at earlier, Kevin, the teen romance love triangle. Like, why can't these shows figure out that doesn't work? Even in the show Wednesday, where there was a love triangle, even Wednesday wasn't into that love triangle herself. So, like, how do these shows get past that? Well, how do we get these shows? The fact that we have a show that's centered around high schoolers, and yes, there's light bullying and there's certain things, but for the most part, the main cast are all like nice to each other. That's a refreshing situation to have in these shows with these characters that are these ages. Why do they all have to be in love? We don't need that for every single one of these shows, and it just feels like there's like a bylaw out there that forces these writers to say, well, if we don't have a love triangle somehow, teens aren't going to watch. I don't know.
It's not a bylaw. It's definitely viewership data. You have to think, like, when you look at shows like Riverdale and what draws attention in, you have pubescent teens that are, obviously
They're in their own love
excited about
triangles. Yeah.
exactly, right? And they're like, oh my god, this is so much like my situation with Adam and Brody. Like they're just, I don't know. Anyways, I'm just
Adam and Brody. Okay.
I don't know. I took one person and split him up into two people.
I appreciate it.
But anyways, what I'm getting at though is that you're right. They shouldn't have to feel prescribed to do it. But that said, we are three men that are obviously on the outside of this world looking at this and acknowledging that these shows don't need it. But for the audience that it is for, that might be their draw. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
Like you're not a pubescent teen.
Yeah,
Not
maybe
anymore,
for the audience,
unfortunately.
everything they watch is about the love triangle, and it's just what theme is around it at the time, given the individual show. And
Sure.
kids are adventurous and far more advanced at a younger age than we are. These kids all know about, washing their privates after intimate times. They all know all about this stuff. So, but I think we've reached the final chapter, and it's time for the signature twist ending. Today, we won't be giving a traditional score on the show, but instead we'll be giving our final thoughts, as well as how much we'd recommend the show on a scale of 1 to 5 bumps on a goose. Nate, why don't you start us off?
Bumps on a goose. Please, if it involves bumps on a goose, let's go. I'll be watching.
He's got bumps on his goose right now, bro. After he's gonna have to use a bar of soap to wash his privates to get all those bumps off.
Oh man, I hope if you're listening to this review and that line sticks with you, I hope you get to that part in the show and it just provides a great laugh. Okay, so yeah, I would recommend it at 3.5 bumps on a goose. I think I would say only though because it's October. If you sleep on this show and you watch some other things instead, and it becomes November 1st, you don't need to watch it. You really don't. I'm just being honest. Like I think I think the show is.
It's a good point.
It's slightly better than I expected it to be after the first episode. After that first episode, I was really low on it, and then I sort of stuck with it. And I will say we've watched 5 episodes, and I do want to see the story conclude. So that's a big deal for a show that I'm kind of sitting at a sort of mid at. I think it's it gets me to that place, but I'm never immensely invested. It's a fun, spooky time. It's probably the best modern take on R.L. Stine's material. So watch it to have some fun times with your family this Halloween season. But if you find something better to watch, and then you can pass on this. Maybe binge it next Halloween if you really want to. But yeah, 3.5 bumps on a goose.
Nice, Justin, yourself.
That might be my favorite rating we've ever done, by the way. I'm
Yeah,
just going to say that right now.
It's awesome. It's perfect. Yeah, I'm with you, Nate. This surprised me. They have me hooked with this mystery, which is dark, and has sort of the right amount of scares to it. I think that the way that they're able to take R.L. Stine's material and lovingly put it into these in a way that enhance the overall mystery is done in a really clever manner. But again, I know I'm not the target audience, so the sort of Gen Z, sort of over the top, like as you said, Nate, like the forced dialogue that feels like it's more for that generation. It just comes off as very synthetic and very, contrived, and there's a purpose and there's a specific audience in mind for this. So I feel like I'm on the outside watching it, and it kind of ties back into what I was saying before. I don't know if there's enough here for our generation that really, outside of just acknowledging the books and the titles, if that's the cool way that we get to stay connected to it, for sure. But you're absolutely right. This is the perfect time to watch it. If it's November 1st, do not watch this.
I mean, it's
wait till next year.
November. Like it will
yeah.
wrap up November 17th is what I just looked up. But
yeah.
Then you're already in. You're already in. But
okay.
if it's November 1st and you haven't started it, don't worry about it. You're
just
good.
wait till Halloween to binge it. But we talk about episodic versus one dump, if you will. So I do think that this series would have probably benefited from the one dump mentality. And I get it. There's going to be some mystery and some draw as they sort of pull out these episodes. But again, it's Halloween. Get people sinking in and talking about it. It kind of has its own, not on the same level, but Stranger Things vibes. And I think that's why the production value is so amped up, is because people like in that generation that they're probably wanting to tap into are watching shows like Stranger Things. So they can go a little darker. They can go a little more with it. So yeah, that said, I'm with you. 3.5 out of 5 bumps on a goose of recommendation. I think if you can, sure, watch it.
Maybe it was, because I was such a big fan of the books that I was hit a bit more with nostalgia, and it might even just come from the episode titles and that intro card featuring the Goosebumps, that old classic font that you could rub your finger over it on the front page of the book and feel the bumps, like
with a bar of soap.
This brought me
you feel the bumps.
Jesus. Yeah. But this brought me back to that feeling. I was so glad to see it wasn't just a Creature of the Week anthology show, and instead took elements from some of those original stories and weaved them into a larger narrative. It is a little confusing in that it seems a little bit caught in the middle in terms of the audience it's made for. It might be a little kiddish for people our age who grew up with the books, but then still too mature or scary for our kids. And so it does sort of target, like you said earlier, Nate, that Gen Z, and the dialogue and the characters are all very much structured to represent today's teenage kid. And that might miss the mark a little on who this show could have been made for. That said, though, like we briefly talked about, it's still resonated and was better overall, in my opinion, than the two movies featuring Jack Black from 2015 and 2018, in that it wasn't so kiddish. The only thing I'm disappointed to see is coming up, we're going to get Slappy, who's my least favorite Goosebumps anything ever, and he's featured in everything. He had like 4 episodes in the original show. He was in both of the movies, and I think he might play a part in this show coming up, and so that always makes, I'm like, it's a ventriloquist dummy. It's not scary, Jesus. But that didn't take away from my overall enjoyment I got in reliving one of my favorite book series growing up. In fact, if anything, it's made me upset that I sold at a garage sale years and years ago my complete 62 book collection.
Why?
I've even looked into purchasing a full set of the original print, so I get those classic covers I love. I'd love to give them to my daughter in like 6 or 7 years when she's starting to read full-size books, just so she could relive some of those fun adventures that I had growing up. But like we said, the performances are all serviceable, especially from the adult cast. But even the young actors, and they're all like in their mid to late 20s, but look almost young enough to be high school. So I think that maybe got a bit better performances out of them than your typical teenage cast, especially when they're working with some of the dialogue and moments they have to work with. I think they pull it off a bit better than you see in this type of show. I found the tone to be quite spooky, and the mystery surrounding the characters and their past actions and motivations have me intrigued enough to find out how it all ends. So overall, whether for fans of the original book series or looking to relive their childhood, or for new fans looking for some October spooks, I'm at a 4 out of 5. Bumps on a goose in terms of recommending this show. But again, that might be my rose-tinted nostalgic glasses. So once again, listener, beware. But that is it for this review of the Disney Plus and Hulu show Goosebumps, streaming on Friday, October 13th. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully it didn't feel like a day at Horrorland. If you enjoyed the program, be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts if you haven't already. Once again, a huge thanks to our friends at Disney Studios Canada for the early screening so we could get this review to you ahead of its release and let you know if the first 5 episodes were spooktacular or if they had us saying, "You can't scare me." We can't wait to hear your thoughts on this new take on the classic kids horror series. Or maybe you just want to write in and see if you can correctly guess how many Goosebump titles I snuck into this episode. Some were seamless. Some were a little janky. As always, you can write in to wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or if that's a bit too much like a cloudy day at Ghost Beach and you're more of the shocker on Shock Street type, hit us up on our socials. Justin, where can they do that?
Well, they can reach us on the app formerly known as Twitter at GeekcentricYT or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
And we are done with the hot geek summer and are now moving into one of the most fun times of the year, the spooky fall season. We recently wrapped our watch club for Ahsoka and are gearing up to have a mini watch club for Loki, starting with episode 4. But in the meantime, check out our spoiler-free review for the first 4 episodes and find out which episode we're most excited for fans to see. Speaking of spoiler-free reviews, check out our thoughts on The Creator and on Expendables 4. we definitely liked one a lot more than the other. There's a ton of great content on the way as we slowly creep towards the award season, so be sure to keep an eye out for those. But if you just can't get enough of our geeky content, check out the amazing array of interviews we've had the fortune of conducting this year with some of our favorite actors, writers, directors, and showrunners. Those can be found wherever you listen to podcasts or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/geekcentric. Until next time, thanks for listening, and as we say,
Love ya.
get home safe, guys.
Peace.